Welcome to the Universal Diner, where life's flavors blend into authentic conversation. Join us at our spacious corner booth as we discuss and explore various topics such as natural health and wellness, yoga, plant medicines, spirituality, and more. There's always room for you, there's always room for our special guests, and there's always room for insight, intuition, and epiphanies to arise. It's harder to raise girls. I was listening to somebody talking about that old belief, and it's like, no, it's just harder to ignore boys. If you actually engaged boys and men in regards to their emotional processes, etc., it would be equally involved.
You've got one of both, brother. Does that ring true?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Validated, backed up, second opinion.
Boys are a bit more rambunctious, general strokes.
Well, no, not in our family. No, quite the opposite. Yeah.
I think the idea is that boys are easier to ignore as far as their emotional expressions go, where girls are more naturally inclined to express them.
Yeah.
And externalize their waves.
Yes.
You can condition a boy just to like keep it all inside and blah, blah, blah. And then you get the illusion that they're easier to raise. But that's just that bullshit. Like so much else in our world.
And hence the mess we're in.
Yes. And on that note, segueing into today's diner session, I'm really happy we're all here together again. It's always somewhat of a challenge, despite our desire all the way around to be here. And I'm really curious what we might chow down on today, since there has been no pre-discussion. No one's had a hankering for a pizza for a week, and we know that's what we're getting. So they haven't given me my menu yet. They were short one. You've been handed yours. What are you seeing on these giant... Oh, there's a little piece of pie smear in the corner of this one today. Oh, well, hygiene's never been one of their better. Great service, though, otherwise. What's striking your fancy? What are you hankering for, as they say in the South?
What do you think, Sim?
Well, I kind of had a bite to eat before showing up here, so I'm not quite sure what I want to choose off the menu because I'm not really hungry.
Okay, brother.
Not too sure.
Okay. This is exactly what the wait people like when they come over and they're like, okay, can I get you started with some drinks? We don't even know if we're supposed to be here. Well, I've always got a wild hair in regards to something or other. I know that I've been wanting to share the whole wealth inequality thing with you guys, the whole coaching industry insights thing. I realize that's somewhat more specific to me than it would be to either one of you, perhaps, and, not to mention our broader audience. Nonetheless, a wild hair is a wild hair. It's not like I've straightened it.
Well, we certainly all have experience as coaches, so just in a variety of covering different areas, I suppose. So I imagine we can all relate to that in some way.
Yes, we certainly can relate. And it doesn't necessarily need to be about the coaching industry. It can be about being a small time sort of cottage industry, mom and pop type entrepreneur in the larger fields of health and wellness and alternative medicine and healing, and what it's like in this current day and age and what it's been like through time for us. That might be an interesting topic. Even as I say that, I'm like, am I adding to the noise, or would we be adding to the noise? Because I know that's been one of Brother's guiding principle. Do not add to noise. Big sign with a slash through it. Big sign with noise in the middle of it.
Indeed, there is a lot of it out there.
There is. And yet at the same time, what I am hearing from tribal members as I reconnect time and time again is that there is an absolute need for our kind of noise. Good trouble, necessary trouble, as the now deceased and the late great John Lewis said. There's a lot of noise, and maybe cutting through with clarity, with a kind of discipline that comes from wisdom speaking truth that will rise above the fray, again, cut through the nonsense and the mediocrity. That might just be the coffee talking. So we got about an hour.
Leading to what, I would ask?
I think there's a lot to be said for just being honest and sincere and transparent and revealing one's challenges and one's delights and one's struggles at a time when it seems that the vast majority of people that are succeeding in doing these kinds of things now are either in tiny little pockets, sequestered away, but have their own kind of built-in community, or are creating these inauthentic avatars, these perfect representations in the online world, and constantly like creating this image. And then they get people that maybe aren't discerning enough to see through it, but are discerning enough to find the right keywords and such. So there is this kind of like blind leading the blind kind of thing a lot of times. I have desire and ambition. You have desire and ambition. So we're meeting in the realm of desire and ambition, whatever it might be. Whereas like, hey, I'm here to help you wake up, at least to the degree I've woken up, and see things as they truly are. And how they truly are is not how they appear on Instagram.
Well, many levels, I imagine, of reality too. So how they really are is perhaps another perspective, but yet a perspective.
There's more to the picture than meets the eye, as the
Yes.
old Neil Young song goes. It's a good mantra to blast into my head once in a while. Look, it's just one possibility. It's just one avenue, but there is a lot of artifice out there. It's easier to be in artifice if you are in the online realm because there's nothing holding you accountable, or at least a lot less holding you accountable. And you can pretend, create, blah, 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 to be whatever you want to be, whatever you aspire to be. There's less need to kind of back it up. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah, and kind of a sidebar that comes up around creating a certain image of oneself on social media. I watch that all the time here. Like just today, I saw a young woman sitting on the beach, and she wasn't just sitting on the beach and enjoying the beauty of the beach. She had her phone up and was posing and doing things in front of her phone many times over. And continually shooting herself in these sort of artificial stances. And meanwhile, there's this incredible scene around her. I noticed that so much here where people are in an incredible landscape. They spend tons of money to like fly to an exotic place. And then they're either buried in their phones or they're shooting themselves over and over and over in some kind of artificial acted out scene. You know, we've all done it to some degree where we're like taking a picture of ourselves or whatever in a certain place. But the amount of time that gets sucked up in creating these whole storylines to then post to social media, I'm just a little bit like, I don't know what the word is. It's just like, wow, how disconnected do we get, you know, from your surroundings and the people that you're with or nature around you. And I mean, I'm sure we've all witnessed this. Anyway, it was just something that I noticed again and again. And it does make me sad because I feel like we're disconnected enough from the world, from the natural world. And so it's just creating even more sort of artifice in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, what a beautiful scene. Let's get a selfie. For that to be immediate second thought is telling. Even if we were to take judgment out of it, it's telling. And then, you know, what is it indicative of? What harm might it be doing? What good might it be doing for that matter? It certainly seems very unnatural.
I'm curious where you see all this heading, Simone.
You mean our conversation, or you mean where humanity is heading based on
humanity.
these behaviors?
Humanity.
Oh, man. I honestly have to say I have a lot of heaviness on my heart these days when I witness sort of where things are headed. I try to look for openings in people where there is a sense of deeper connection. But I honestly feel like people are in more dire straits than even a few years back. And it doesn't make me feel all that positive about where we are headed in the future.
I second that emotion.
How
And
about
feeling
you, brother? Oh, we got a little fish guy action.
Continue your thoughts, Roy. Oh, what were you going to say?
I was trying to go next. And now me. Fish are always at the bottom of the barrel.
I think we should invite Fish Guy in for a little bit more of his opinion on things.
He's always good for a rant, being a species who's been misplaced.
Oh, yeah, exactly. One misplaced out of the ocean.
Indeed. Well, I'll start with a little more of a broad view. When I was coming of age for various reasons, I was presented with the idea and always saw that the world was rigged, that the table was tilted, that the whole thing was ridiculous, like imbalance to the point of ridiculousness. And now, as is the case with many older people looking back, it seems like those were the good old days. In the good old days, it might be that, say, someone built a house and then they built a little, what they used to call like a mother-in-law cabin or something, and they had that to rent out as a little extra. Now, as one of a zillion examples of the seeming extremism, people build a little house for themselves and then they build 36 mother-in-law cabins because it's like not enough just to be well enough. It's like you have to go to scale, you have to 10x, you have to drive towards more and more. And I understand that to a degree because it's not enough just to be okay, because it's still such a precarious position, even though, say, to all of us, it seems pretty stable. And I think also as younger people come of age, look at the lay of the land, they realize, okay, you've completely messed it up. Everything is precarious. Everything is tenuous here. The only possibility I have of like getting in a situation where I'm going to be able to ride this out from my natural life with comfort and security and some sense of an unfrayed social fabric around me, I've got to go for it. Kind of like a gambler letting all their chips ride on red or something. And that is reflected in Wall Street. That is reflected in Silicon Valley to an even greater degree. And you just get people that are unabashedly lying and cheating and risking other people's money in this kind of yeehaw cowboy wayward fashion. And
But
that
that's
seems
nothing
to be the
new.
world. No, but
That's nothing new.
the degree of it seems to be as extreme as ever. Gordon Gekko from the old Wall Street movie is now looking kind of like a wimp. He was a lightweight. Guy was practically a socialist Democrat.
Well, I mean, that's always, like you just said, probably always those who are coming into the elder years are like, oh, back in the good old days. So I do wonder how much it is just having some life experience and looking back going, well, are things worse than ever? Or is it just what people always think when they hit a certain age?
It's a factor, but it's certainly not all of it, because there are a lot of other significant changes afoot that are objectively very different.
Mm.
And brother, I like that you played coach and asked us what we thought about it. And now, with a burning desire, I ask you the same thing. How are you seeing it from here and now?
Better get right with God.
Yeah? Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, not that I'm a biblical scholar, but all of this has been prophesized, the end times and the last days. And if we look at the Old Testament prophesizing the arrival of Jesus and everything that he accomplished, kind of the New Testament is pointing us to end times and the state of society and what things will be unfolding. And it's interesting to see the parallels in what we are facing right now and whether we believe in second coming of Christ as a physical being coming down on a white horse with robe dripping in blood and swords drawn, or as an inner revolution of Christ consciousness. But I think, yeah, it's a good time to get right with God.
it's always a good time to get right with God, I would say. And perhaps now the pressure is on. And of course, it's not just from the Christian tradition, it's from so many. I would go so far as to say the majority of wisdom traditions, major and minor, as it were, that have foretold this time. The Great Turning, the third or the fourth or the fifth world, depending on which, I think it's either the fourth or the fifth world, depending on which Native American prophecy you're looking at, et cetera, et cetera. And plus, just on a physical reality, we see that things are not sustainable and they're very, very rapidly heading to a point where there's going to be a sudden breakdown rather than a transition, a smooth transition. I think the most we can hope for is a sudden quantum leap. And whatever does it, Christ's return, a giant volcano, let's just call that Pele's return, the only thing that's going to allow us the shift that we need, meaning fast enough and significant enough, is going to be a massive spiritual awakening. Like California falls into the sea and we all look at each other and go, oh my God, it's just us and we are part of spirit and we are all one and let's do this. Or somewhere between that and the vehicle smashing against the wall. Are we going to hit it head on? Are we going to be able to yank the steering wheel to the right at the last minute and, make the impact a little less full on? But no matter how you look at it, I don't see things being sustainable. And the only people that can actually buy into that lie are the ones that are entrenched firmly enough in the mainstream where, at least for the rest of their lives, as far as they can see, they have filters and walls and moats and checks and balances and bank accounts, et cetera, that will protect them until the hordes crash into where they're at.
I think just whatever lens you look at it through, I'm always interested in looking at the larger patterns and cycles of nature. This is just what happens in the cycles of nature. Things go out of balance and then something has to occur to bring it back into balance. But it's not the first time, whether it's the earth wipes things clean or massive shift, massive revolutions occur. I mean, this happens both on the individual level as well as the collective level, right? Oftentimes on an individual level, if one is living life kind of out of alignment with the deeper truth of your being, big life challenges come along. Something extremely traumatic happens, and then that oftentimes will get things back on some track. And if that happens on an individual level, it equally is happening on a collective level. So I think that's one of the things that we're seeing. And oftentimes, right, when things are hunky-dory and everything's going well, even though we know we need to change, we don't really change until life comes along and hits us over the head with you need to change. And I think that's kind of what's happening with humanity. It's we know we have to change, but we're not. So nature's going to come along and do it for us, whether it's through our own systems, economic systems, or whether it's through climate change or whatever, right? There's quite a few foreseeable challenges coming our way.
I don't know because I don't hang out with them, but it seems like while most people realize we have to change one way or the other, most people realize that the system isn't working, even though we have widely differing perspectives on what might need to be done to get it fixed, to make it better. There seems to be a core of people in power who are so anesthetized, insulated as a result that they don't think things have to change because things are still working for that upper echelon of people. 1% of
Sure,
people
like I said, why would you change anything if you don't have to, right? So yeah, that 1% at the top don't really have to change much.
Yeah, and the 0.1% own more than half of the world's resources. The bottom 1% own less than 1%. So in a situation that is so extremely polarized, with those people who, again, have the wealth and the bunkers and such, who are basically controlling things seemingly on a physical level, if they think they're going to be okay and their families are going to be okay, they're not going to do what it takes to make the changes. And they are the ones that are in the position to do it beyond the spiritual aspects, or not counting the metaphysical dimensions that are going on here, which ultimately are the more important ones. But yeah, I mean, that's who needs to change. But the system is not only working for them, it's built by them. It's not only built by them, it's rigged by them. So until things are lashing at their walls.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely point to us and them kind of model, which has truth to it. But I think ultimately we all have to look at ourselves too, of like, where is it that I need to make changes in my own lifestyle? And where am I contributing to all of this? So I think we all have personal responsibilities as well.
And the counterpoint to that, and again, I'm just going to look at the physical level. Even if every consumer made significant changes in their consumption, that would not even scratch the surface of what needs to be done. And in fact, a lot of these big companies are trying to put the responsibility on people. Well, use 2 less sheets of toilet paper every day, where you are the ones that are emitting the pollutants and gouging the land. Like, and yeah, of course it's related to consumerism, but like, we're just a tiny fraction of what,
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. It's not really what I meant. I think what I meant really has a bit more to do with just the deeper kind of connection to our own souls, to our own ways of how can we be more humane in our own interrelating.
Hallelujah to that. Absolutely. Yeah. And that may be enough, more than enough, to change things fundamentally. If every person took personal responsibility to get right with their soul, their heart, in tune, radiate accordingly, aligned with spirit. And now we go live to Brother in the Yurt, who is now sipping his yerba mate. Yerba mate. I say it again just because it's so fun to say, yerba mate. And in speaking Spanish so much at the moment, my tongue is flexible enough and my mouth is open enough. Both things that are requirements when you speak Spanish compared to English. Yerba mate.
I mean, when we talk about things that need to change, on one hand, like you said, Simone, it's like the seasons, the cycles of change universally taking place, unfolding. And then on a human level, talking about changes that need to happen or whatever. I don't know. To me, it often feels like we're just trying to stop a tidal wave, Instead of moving with the flood, we're trying to build dams to stop the flood from coming.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So in many ways, it feels inevitable, the winter season of change globally. And I go back to get right with God, which is essentially what you guys are saying, looking within yourself and seeing, what do I need to do to get myself settled internally with whatever powers to be you believe in or whatever. But for me, it's easy to see why so many people are finding their stability in faith in God or in something bigger than themselves, with so much imminent change and happening in the physical world. Yeah, it seems like the only place to find that deep stability and deep trust and is in the metaphysical.
Totally. And isn't that perhaps also one of the reasons why it might be happening this way, is that actually it's shaking us to a point where it's like, well, what is true? What is real? Like, how do you come back to that? And like I said earlier, oftentimes it does require quite a shakeup, right? On the individual level. And here we're seeing it on the collective level. But sometimes a big traumatic event or series of events needs to happen in someone's life for them to come back to, like, what is it that I can hang on to, right? Something deep within. And maybe that is in part, the invitation on a collective level is, who are you at your very core? And who are you if you look at humanity as a single being, as an organism? Perhaps this is a massive shakeup to bring humanity more into alignment with, like, who am I?
Again, to go back to my perspective in youth, even though I saw that the system was like completely haywire and made lots of conscious and unconscious decisions to just not be involved with it. And while I spent a lot of my early youth rebelling against it directly, I have been able to rely on my many, many default privileges just so I didn't have to engage with it directly. I could sort of pass when I needed to. I could live off the fat of the land here and there. I could take it or leave it, but I just didn't have to deal with it. And that kind of complacency came from privilege, and I'm realizing that more than ever. Nonetheless, there was always a part of me that believed we were just, no matter what level you look at it at, that we were winning the culture war, that society was evolving, that we were heading towards fixing some of these major systemic issues, whether they be in the environment or not, and things were going to balance out. And these jacked up Wall Street, Gordon Gekko types were getting their day in court and then in prison and all of that. I was still hopeful. Part of me wanted it to happen in that kind of youthful male, like, yeah, burn it all down kind of way. Now that it actually appears to be on fire, now that I'm older, now that my body is more fragile, now that I have become far more sensitive, now that I want to live life attuned with my fellow creatures on this planet, now that I know how to speak to them and have relationships with them, now that I'm attuned to Gaia and all of her trials and tribulations, now I don't want it to happen if it doesn't have to. And at the same time, increasingly, it seems inevitable and imminent and quite possibly absolutely in order. But the suffering that is ultimately necessary, but on some level is completely avoidable if we would have simply used our consciousness and gotten right with God en masse sooner enough, it wouldn't actually have to happen because we could co-create it. This has always been part of the prophecy, always been up to us.
Well, and isn't the question always the what ifs, right? Like, what if we had caught on sooner? What if ultimately we haven't, and the reality just is, it is how it is, right? So then the question becomes, how do we each show up in this? I'm curious to hear from both of you, like, if things do seem rather dire as we look at the future outlook, what role do we each have to play in this? What's our contribution to it rather than complaining about it, which I don't think we're doing. We're just kind of sharing our observations. But what do we do with this? How do you apply your own life to this?
Warrior number one, brother, please step up to the platform.
I don't know if it's a conscious choosing to go forward in the way that I am, but as you guys know, the current struggles in my life, the challenges are definitely pushing me in a direction that I didn't sit down and consciously choose, but it seems to be pulling me along. And I find myself, maybe because of having kids and contemplating their future as well, sounds crazy even to say this, but I am like really resonating with really conservative views of ways of being in the world. I feel like it's strange reading the Bible for the first time in my life, and it's been around me my whole life, and feeling this draw towards having this solid foundation for my kids and for my family. And so I'm in the process of it continually, and as we all are, of finding our way through and seeing what steps are necessary to take next. But for me, it's pushing me in a really beautiful, interesting, surprising direction of really once again challenging so much of what I held true for so long, and really challenging that with openness and really wanting to look and understand something that is coming to me unsolicited, like coming to me and asking, like, what is this about? Why is this coming into my life? And really exploring it with an openness. And it seems to be something really solid and true.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing that openly. Yeah, an unexpected path, one that is arriving and that you're responding to. And we all honor that because that has been our way of life so far. And whatever else has come with that, it has led us to where we are. And it's a primary way that we have been guided and guided ourselves. And who knows what form it will take at any given time. And Simone, I'm curious what your response to your question is.
I asked you guys. I'm curious what your response is.
Well, I'm going to acknowledge the us and themness that seems to be coming into my sphere, which I'm not particularly attached to. And I do see it in perspective. But I also realize that, yes, in the spirit, all is one, all is in order. I do have that fundamental belief. But then I see how in the realm of duality, massive things need to play out as part of what the oneness is doing, essentially. And somehow my own personal way forward needs to have the fuel of the warrior, and the warrior in part needs to confront, defend, etc., any deviancy from living in the spirit. Paradoxically, you have to fight to keep the peace, sort of thing, on some level. And I don't mean doing harm, but do what it takes to defend against it, to resistance, to create space around, to protect what is pure and sacred. Right now, I have the metaphor of being in the fog of war on or in a battlefield. And even though my sword is drawn, my shield is up and my heart is open. So I'm protecting my heart from those forces which seem to be drawing me in, that might be necessary for survival or not, but that I do not want to succumb to. My sword is out in case I need to cut through illusions, etc. Again, not to do harm. And then they're both out so that my heart can be open, even in this fog, even as at best only the next move is available to me. And I can do it. It's nice to see I have it in me still at this point in my life. But I also know that the longer I need to be in that state of engagement, the more it starts to wear on me. Doubt has a chance to creep in, lack of alignment, right? The things I see around me through the fog here and there. Sometimes there's great beauty, and sometimes there's horror. And all of that, being in that, again, extended period of alertness and warrior mode, will have repercussions. There will be a period of healing and regeneration and renewal when that becomes available to me. So right now I'm in it. There's only so much perspective you can have when you're in it versus before you're in it, not to mention once you're out of it.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting just to hear how each of our positions in life, even though we have a lot of commonality, our situations demand different parts of us, perhaps. So as I hear you speak about kind of more the warrior role of being sort of in ready and sort of in the battleground, to me, a lot of what I see is about directing attention towards what is healthy, what can we build, rather than fighting old systems and old paradigms. How can we put our attention towards building up something that got a solid foundation from the ground up, which is really how can we be in good relationship with ourselves, with each other, with the world around us, with the planet, with other beings, which I know you share. Like, I'm not saying that you're not doing that, but I guess that's kind of where my attention primarily seems to be at this point, is tending to the quieter ground of creating sort of a gentler, soft place where people can kind of come into the fold and perhaps tend to their wounds or tend to their difficulties, but in a space that feels safe and held, so that the opening can perhaps continue to occur, so that people can build up perhaps more harmoniously from the inside out. And then that hopefully ripples out into the field. Yeah, I don't know if that articulates things, but that's just kind of my sense at the moment. And
Yeah.
also fully recognizing that that too is something that comes out of a real privilege, right? There's plenty of people in the world who are under circumstances that are just horrendous, especially given that there's so much conflict and wars happening and poverty and depression. And so I'm very much aware that what I am gifted with right now in my life is that I have some spaciousness and some freedom to actually tend to my own inner world. But by doing so, I'm creating spaces and have always created spaces for people to come in and kind of tend to themselves and learn skills and tools that can perhaps help them have more capacity and more life skills, perhaps, to deal with the difficulties and challenges that are coming our way.
Yes, I honor that. It's beautiful. We need as much of that in the world as possible. And in essence, our hearts, our souls, we are all of one mind and one heart. The ways that we are engaging with whatever our perceived realities are at this point may be different, as are the specific details of our situation. So while I too, as you know, am staying attuned as much as I can and being of service and open and spacious and loving and talking to my plant friends and my bird friends and living in this larger space, your situation is such that the invisible hand of the market, as they say in economics, has not reached up behind you, grabbed you by the back of the head and neck, and is forcing you to look deeply into the details of the current capitalist system as it is exploiting people and asking you to be part of it. And I'm as live and let live as anyone. Maybe I have my beliefs, but like, okay, that's your journey. Cool. But once someone tries to restrict the freedom of a free spirit and direct me in a direction that I know all too well from inner knowing, from experience, etc., is against the interests of humanity and other beings on this earth, that's when I'm like, okay, I'm a really nice guy, but you don't want me as an enemy. Enough is enough. And here I make my stand.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Those words are key, like making a stand, right? As opposed to taking sides.
Absolutely. I love you, and here are my boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is more dangerous than mutiny. I appear to be among you, but I am not aligned with you. You are not in integrity. The surprise force within.
Mm-hmm. Just the it's stoking a fire in you that perhaps has not been, it wasn't lit before, or maybe it just was like a little pilot light and now it's like starting to really get stoked, right? Like,
Yeah, it's got my jihad up. Well, I was just going to refer to something Brother and I talked about, in part to segue back to his perspective. We, in our discussing of how we've used our personal power and how we haven't through our lives, the idea arose that we have been given an enormous amount of personal power. We have all of the default privileges. Like, we're not just male, we're like big, strong males. We're not just white men, we're like particularly good looking men, or at least we were. I'll let you be the judge of that. Like supercharged aspects of the overall privilege basket. And as such, we're like, we have so much power. We have more than enough power. Like, we don't need to use it. We don't need to throw it around. It wasn't withheld from us. We don't need to compensate by becoming, wealthy, all the things people deal with that trauma. We've had our own, certainly, but it's like, we can take it or leave it. And that is an enormous position of privilege and power just in and of itself. The idea of wanting to acquire more has been a bit of a conundrum for both of us, at least at times.
yeah, it's interesting you touch on that, because that wasn't a menu item that I was curious about in asking both of you, like what your relationship is to, I want to see, to being a man, but like to being a man in the face of the world that we're in with all the privilege that you speak of. And yet, how do you see stepping into a role that is empowered and is empowering to all of the damage that has occurred in the name of of pretty much colonial powers, white male powers? How do you see kind of, I mean, it's not on your shoulders to rectify it, but again, on an individual level, we do what we can to perhaps right some wrongs that have been done in the past. And I'm just curious what your perspective is on that. Does that question make sense, brother?
I don't know. You go first, Troy.
Well, as I said, I am newly aware of how I have used systemic privilege in default ways. And I am newly motivated to use it in more overt, direct ways on this earth, because whatever is true in the spirit, I'm going to live through my being as best I can as an aspect of anything and everything I do in a worldly sense. And while the terminology might not be perfect, it's not enough just to not be racist. For example, it is now the time to be an anti-racist. It is now a time to come forth and say, I am of this tribe, at least seemingly. Although I have not been given all the keys to the kingdom, I have been given many. And I find all of the isms of the planet, all of the divisions, all the separation in all of its forms, from subtle to gross, abhorrent. And I do not want to live on a planet like this. And it may well be that this planet is a school, and we are all here to learn, and we are all at different stages. And now here I am. And as part of me being, let's just say, a senior in high school rather than a freshman, it's my job to come forward in small ways, in big ways, whatever ways are available, to speak as well, to share as well and as much, to love as completely and openly as I can, but also a little more specifically, not to be trying to teach mathematics to the kindergartners when the elders are saying, you are here to help the most progressive and evolved among us save this place, honor this place. We need you here at this table. Others will take care of the others. And I think as part of my, we're all one, doesn't matter, I'll just serve whoever is here, which is still the case. If I am supporting those who are in positions of leadership that are doing harm to the planet, even as people, they might be decent, then I am feeding the wrong wolf. So again, on the level of duality, it's like I need to be aligned with those that are the most awakened and that are doing everything they can on every level, spiritually, physically, emotionally, the healers, the builders, all of it. Stop dilly-dallying. Come forth. Enter into your full power. Join us. The time is now.
Oh,
Stop fucking around.
Brother, it's your turn. Perhaps a little slant on the question.
Yeah.
You have a son.
Yes.
How do you, as a man, as a father, what kind of legacy would you like to leave for your son, in the sense of being a boy in this world and perhaps a force for change from what, from what has been left by the legacy of the white man?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I only hesitate in my response because it's in such flux right now. And what feels most important to me more than anything in leading my family is our relationship with God, and praising God and giving all praise and glory to God, and developing this relationship with the kids so they have a deep relationship with God, with Jesus, and that they know that essentially this isn't their home. That's, I mean, we're here to glorify, and I want to be an example of that. I want to be an example of Christ walking here on the earth, and I want to exemplify that with kids, with my family, with culture, with wherever I go. That's what feels most relevant to leave as a legacy for my kids. And if you would have asked me a year ago, it would have been a different answer. But that's where I'm at right now, and it's growing and it's in flux. But that's what is definitely deepening in me more and more. That's, I want them to find their strength and their stability there, recognizing that we are in the world, but not of it, that we are truly not of this world. We're not from here. This is just a temporary, however we call it or whatever we call it. But yeah.
I have a curiosity around that because, I mean, I honor your depth of passion and connection with this. And yet so much destruction has been caused in the name of Jesus and Christianity and God and so on. So I'm just curious, because I feel in myself, on the one hand, honoring you and knowing you and loving you. And on the other hand, also knowing the immense amount of suffering and, how many women, indigenous people have been murdered in the name of Christianity and other religions too. But so I'm just curious how you discern
Yeah.
those pieces, because that's also an enormous legacy that has been left, right?
Yeah. I'm realizing that's in many ways, I don't like this term, but it describes it perfectly. That's throwing away the baby with the bathwater. I think there is so much wisdom, and that's what I'm starting to see more and more, that in its purest sense, in its pure form, there is so much wisdom in. I'm exploring Christianity right now. That's calling me. So when I'm exploring the Bible and really seeking to understand what a true relationship with God really looks like, really seeking to understand what a true relationship with Christ and what that looks like to walk with Christ really means. And I am filtering through so much information, within myself and on the outside. But I feel like it would be throwing in the baby out with the bathwater to simply say that so much calamity has happened in the name of religion or in the name of God or in the name of Jesus. At least that's what I'm seeing now, is like, because I had all those beliefs. I didn't utter the word God or Jesus for over 20 years, being brought up Catholic and then just being totally put off by religion altogether. And I think that's where a lot of people are, especially from our generation, where religion was just kind of what you did because that's what your family was into. So you went to church and God was just put on you. Jesus was just put on you, or whoever, whatever religion you were exposed to. And then I know for me at 18 years old, I was done. I'm like, yeah, I am completely done with all of this stuff. Like, good. And then I became spiritual, and then all things were about the divine and the universe. And, the one thing I realized that over the last 20 some years, my spirituality, I do air quotes for that, my spirituality has been very impersonal. It's become very impersonal in the way of like just speaking about the universe or collective consciousness. And for some reason, I sense that it's around having kids now. It's become so much personal again. It's become embodied in God and in Christ. And there's something really appealing about that for me now in a way that it never was in the past. And it's doing something magical in me. And I can't fully explain it right now, but it's transforming me. It's renewing me. It is opening my mind and my heart in ways that, like I keep saying, it's unexpected and it's surprising. And yet there's something about it that feels very, very true and very, very stable and very, very assuring and feels right. Feels right. Yeah.
As you speak about how it's really about sort of this embodiment, I can relate to that through more the we use different language, but I think we're kind of pointing towards a similar essence. But for me, it's very much about being in the feminine. My body, a woman's body, is very much very, very in the cycles of nature. And I have come to understand my own spirituality to be very, very intimately linked with my own cyclical nature. And within that cyclical nature, also getting to experience that which is stable within all of that, and that is fully aligned and yet an expression in these cyclical patterns of my own embodiment and how I move in the world, and my relationship to the embodiment of the world and Gaia, the Pachamama, the planet, the other life, other beings. And so I connect to that piece that you talk about it being increasingly a deeply personal experience and deeply spiritual through one's embodiment.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where it all goes. On our next call, I'll be able to share an experience I'm about to have. I feel very hopeful.
We too are very curious, and probably far more important than that, we love you unconditionally by its nature. In other words, that's redundant. Love is unconditional. And playing our respective roles here a bit, at least historically, you have been, of the three of us, the one that is in the upper world, that has developed a spirituality that is of the upper world, to look at it in shamanic terms, mostly. Simone has increasingly developed a spirituality, a relationship with the all that is of the underworld. plants, elementals, spirits, earth, embodiment. And as we have determined in the past, no matter how true or not true this is, I am a little bit of the middle world person with a foot in each camp. So I'm just using my position to honor both of your journeys. And the phrase that defines truth is the sum total of an infinite number of realities. Seems apt here, right? All things that are aspects of the one, all equally valid dimensions, because again, they are inherently part of the whole. It not only comes to mind, I'm obviously moved to speak it. And regardless of all of these things that you've expressed, then there are the ways that they are manifesting and what seems to be conventional reality, consensual reality, I think is more the word I'm looking for. And so how do we live the deepest truths as we know them to be in every aspect of our life? How do we honor that? And that really can be a guiding mantra moment to moment in our life. How do I radiate Jesus? How do I express the beauty and power of the feminine? Brother, you said if we would have asked you this question a year ago, your answer would have been very different. And I'm just thinking about this joke that Ram Dass has told throughout his teaching career, that after decades of huffing and puffing and trying to get enlightened and learn and all these practices and such, he met an old colleague from the Harvard days. And after 5 minutes of talking to him, the guy said, "You know what, Dick? You haven't changed a bit."
Yeah.
So to use that in your situation, you may have answered differently a year ago, but ever since I have known you, you are a walking embodiment of the radiant heart of Jesus. You are a holy man in even kind of a traditional sense, and being kind and strong and open and patient and loving. You are an aspect of Jesus walking on this earth, whether you choose to formalize it now or you did or didn't in the past. The essence of you has been living that, in my experience, the whole way.
Yeah, perhaps it feels like maybe there's a bigger reason for it now, where that may have been, in a way, how I was walking through the world. I definitely feel much more intentionality around it now. Well, like I said, it's changing. It feels different, but yeah, I get your point.
Jesus has put a spark in your step.
Something like that.
Wonderful. And it's really powerful medicine that's speaking to you. And it's the medicine that you are to be with now and maybe forever, but certainly now. That's very clear to me.
Yeah, for sure. And it all started with the Nevilling. It's so funny that it goes all the way back to listening to Neville for the first time and being like, "Oh man, this message of Christ consciousness is like so on point. It's got all this Bible stuff in it that I don't really want to listen to that, but I like his message." And that was where it all started, you know?
Yeah. He slid into your DMs, as the kids say. I don't even know what that means, but it sounds cool.
Here was Neville speaking of mystical Jesus and the mystical interpretation of the Bible, the Gnostic interpretation of the Bible, and saying that if he could only have one book with him, it would be the Bible, you know, that it was his favorite book. There was something off-putting about it in the beginning, and yet here I am 9 months later.
Yeah. After the gestation period, 9 months later.
Yeah, exactly.
Baby Jesus.
Uh-huh. Just to bring the feminine back into it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Simone, as we all kind of grab our coats and our scarves and our purses and our bags and prepare to part here to leave our diner booth, I'm just wondering if you have any last things that you would like to share.
No, that feels well-rounded, that conversation.
Yes, I really like where it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
As always, may it be of service to all of you out there. Thank you for being part of our unfoldment, our journey, our growth, our explorations. We hope it is also part of yours.
Mm-hmm.
Bye for now, and see you again soon
On our Godcast.